friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Zelensky. He made a lot of very interesting statements right before the beginning of talks between the United States of America and the Russian Federation that are going to take place today on the territory of Miami. Zelensky stated that Ukraine cannot withdraw from its territories. There is neither the possibility nor the desire to do so, and the Ukrainian people do not want this either. Ukraine controls parts of the Donetsk and Lugansk regions and does not intend to leave its territories. Furthermore, he stated that after this ceasefire, Ukraine will not be able to sustain an army of 800,000 people on its own. During this period, Ukraine will need the support of partners and a guarantee of security. Furthermore, Zelensky stated that there may not be a peace agreement. A peace agreement exists not only on paper, it exists when the war is stopped, he said at the meeting with the Portuguese Prime Minister. Peace is better than war, but not at any cost. We have already paid a high price. He also reported that Ukraine Armed Forces Foreign Ministry has begun work on creating the necessary infrastructure for elections. A ceasefire may be declared in Ukraine for the duration of the presidential elections. You know that we received a very interesting statement that came from the territory of the Russian Federation. So this is Medvedchuk. He is the leader of the Other Ukraine movement, and he stated that without the votes of Ukrainians living in Russia and refugees abroad, elections in Ukraine will not be legitimate. He stated this during the previous 24-48 hours, and he is going to compete Zelensky on the presidential elections, but most likely he will not be able to return to the territory of Ukraine. So the presidential elections on Ukraine are going to be a very interesting game, political game between the West and the East, and as it was told, Russia will never recognize these elections if Ukrainians on the territory of Russia are not taking part in this process. Furthermore, we received the report that the anti-corruption offices and bureaus are preparing a new attacks on Zelensky's inner circle, which most likely are going to happen in coming days. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's continue with the Odessa region, where the Russians continue bombing and attacking the objects of critical infrastructure in this area. During the previous night we received at least 2 videos from this region. So this is the first one, and this video came to us from the settlement of Sychovka. Here we can see attacks with drones on Ukrainian probably oil refineries or some oil warehouses or oil storages. The Russians were attacking in this territory with drones, and we can see a very heavy explosion in this area. And when the explosions started, the Ukrainians from this area began running away with their trucks completely filled with fuel. So the Russians continue their attacks in this area. Furthermore, the Russians, according to information we have, attacked the settlement of Mayaki. More precisely, the Russians once again attacked the bridge in this area. So now it's clear that the Russians are going to destroy the bridge completely without any chances for Ukrainians to restore the bridge. And as we discussed in the previous videos, currently up to 60% of fuel in Ukraine goes right exactly through the southwestern part of Ukraine. If Russians are able to destroy the bridge, obviously this will increase costs for Ukrainians. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and let's continue with the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published this video, and here we can see the line of defense, the second Zaporozhye wall or something like this, that was created by Ukrainians. Here we can see a Ukrainian drone that was flying above this area and that was filming the defense layer of a new Zaporozhye wall. And here we can see a very powerful defense line created by Ukrainians, and the main purpose of this defense line is to stop the Russian offensive operation deep inside of the Zaporozhye region and Dnipropetrovsk region as well. So this video was made right exactly at this point. So the Russian drone was flying above this area, and during the video we might see the defense line that goes, let's say, around the settlement of Novonikolaevka. So yes, we can confirm that this defense line is a very strong defense line, but the problem is that the Russians most likely will not attack in this direction. As we discussed in the previous videos, the Russians most likely will attack a bit further to the south in the direction of the city of Zaporozhye. So very likely that the Russians will be able to avoid this defense belt and to continue offensive operation further in the direction of the city. As for the situation on the ground, during the previous 12 hours, we received the report that Russians improved their positions in the area of the settlement by the name of Gulay Polya. So these are the changes between the 20th and the 21st of December of 2025. And this report came to us, was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. According to them, the Russians improved their positions to the south of the settlement of Gulay Polya, and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, during the previous 12 hours, we received this video. Here we can see how Russians were bombing and attacking the last stronghold on the territory of the city of Gulay Polya, which is located in the most western part of the settlement. So the Russians, as you can see, began bombing and attacking the most western positions of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the city of Gulay Polya, which means that the Russians are getting closer and closer to the final points of the battle for the settlement of Gulay Polya. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Dnipropetrovsk direction. During the previous 12 hours, we have adjusted the map in the area of Ivanovka. Basically, we colored the territories back under Russian control. I would like to remind you that before all these negotiations started, the Ukrainians launched a counter-offensive operation in the area of the settlement of Ivanovka, and Ukrainians reported that as a result of counter-offensive operation, they managed to restore almost complete control over this settlement. But later we received reports that neither the Ukrainians counterattacked nor their counterattack was completely unsuccessful. So today we have this video. Here we can see how special forces of the armed forces of Ukraine were counterattacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the northwestern part of the settlement of Ivanovka. And then when this counterattack was carried out by Ukrainians, they retreated towards the settlement in the northern direction, towards the settlement of Tarasovka. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that if Ukrainians attacked Russian positions in this area, this means that the entire settlement of Ivanovka is under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Based on the video that was published by Ukrainians, we adjusted the map and colored the entire settlement under complete control of the armed forces of Russian Federation. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sivers direction. During the previous nights, we received small changes. First of all, and this is a very important piece of news, pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed that the Russians improved their positions significantly around the city of Siversk, and that the Russians continue their offensive operation further in the western direction. Based on the report that was published by this Ukrainian source, we haven't adjusted almost anything, just a small part in the area of the settlement of Kuzminivkavka. Even this report, not this one, but this one in the area of the settlement of Svetopokrovskaya. The Russians, according to this report, currently are outflanking the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the territory of Svetopokrovsk. Few more strongholds were taken by Russians, and the Russians approached the final stronghold in this direction. We are talking about this territory. So based on this report that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, we can say that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Svetopokrovsk and to get to the outskirts of the settlement of Riznikovka. Several pro-Russian sources reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions in the area of Kuzminovka and Khromovka. Basically, the Russians entered the village of Khromovka or Bandarna, and the clashes are taking place on its eastern outskirts. So Russians continue their offensive operation, and the Russians will continue until they get to the city of Slaviansk. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Kupiansk during the previous 12 hours. The map has been adjusted once again. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates between the 17th and the 21st of December of 2025. As you can see, almost every single day we adjust the map in Ukrainian favor. Today we received two videos from this direction that allow us to make additional changes. So this is the first video that was published by pro-Russian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were answering a building in this area and how Russians later began attacking this building with FPV drones. So these attacks took place right exactly in this area. The Ukrainians managed to improve their positions, as you can see, in the northern part of the settlement. Furthermore, another video was published from the southern part of the settlement. Here we can see the same story. The sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the armored forces of Ukraine were moving through the buildings and Russians were attacking their positions. So there are two Ukrainians, as you can see, right inside of this building. This attack with FPV drone took place right exactly at this point. So based on this video, we have also adjusted the southern part of the settlement. So we see that the news around positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation on the territory of the city of Kupiansk is tightening. The Ukrainians continue counterattacks. One thing is clear, and according to these videos, we can make this conclusion that Ukraine suffered huge losses during these offensive operations. The Russians, as of now, are trying to defend themselves just with FPV drones without being involved into close combat. The Russians are trying to keep a distance with Ukrainians, but at some point when the Russians realize that Ukrainians are exhausted, the Russians will counterattack and they will try to restore control over the territories they lost during the Ukrainian counteroffensive. You know that this is not the first counteroffensive operation from the Ukrainian side. I would like to remind you that in August and September of 2025, Ukrainians counterattacked to the north of the settlement of Rodinska in this direction. Yes, Ukrainians managed to recapture some positions and then they stopped, and now we see that the Russians are counterattacking once again, and now the Russians are returning everything they lost during August, September, October of 2025. So most likely Ukrainians will be able to improve their positions in the area of the city of Kupiansk, but it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. We're talking about the time that Ukrainians will be able to win during these counterattacks. Then Russians, of course, will continue their own offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over this pocket to the east of the river Voskol and, of course, over the city of Kupiansk itself. Now let's talk about the Sumy direction. Now this direction is probably the most interesting along the entire line of combat contact, because according to information we have, Russians yesterday launched their offensive operation. They crossed the border with Ukraine at this point. Yesterday the Russians stated that they managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Vysoke. Later, several pro-Russian sources stated that Russians improved their positions as well on the territory of Grabovskoye. This information was also confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources. So these are the changes on the ground between 2 days. This is the situation by the end of the 19th, this is 20th, and this is the beginning of the 21st of December of 2025. Furthermore, pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed that something is happening in this direction. They colored this territory, as you can see, as a gray zone. And today we got another important update that Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to enter the settlement of Ryasna. So this village, currently the clashes are taking place right exactly for this area. So there are very high chances that in coming days or maybe even hours, the territory in this direction would be adjusted like this. Furthermore, we received a report published by pro-Ukrainian sources that Sumy Oblast, Sumy regional authorities announced an enhanced evacuation from the Krasnopolsky district, where Russian armored forces crossed the border near the village of Grabovskoye. So Ukrainians began evacuation of this region with the purpose to bring additional reinforcements and reserves. So it seems that the clashes are going to continue in this direction. Russians most likely will try to improve their positions and to get as close as possible to the city of Sumy from the southeast. Especially the Russians will try to maybe even cut physically railways between the city of Sumy and the city of Kharkiv. If Russians can cut these railways physically, this can probably bring problems to the entire Ukrainian logistic on the eastern part of Ukraine. So let's wait and see what is going to be next, but one thing is clear, that most likely the United States of America is no longer able to be involved in this conflict. Currently they have their own problems. I believe that everybody has already seen and watched updates about the situation around Venezuela. Today we got a report that another oil tanker was seized by the United States of America, and states published this video of this special operation that was carried out in this area. And this is the second oil tanker that was arrested by the US authorities. We believe that this is not the last one. We believe there are going to be more tankers. For the moment, the most important, that this tanker belonged to a China company. So another round of escalation in this region, and most likely we're going to see more and more escalations and more attempts from the US side to establish probably complete control over this territory. And that's it for the short video on military summary. Channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.